Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Boran Zaza, and I'm the Director of Communications and Development at Orchestras Canada, Orchestra Canada. Before I begin, I would like to point out that Orchestras Canada is a virtual organization. This means that we work from wherever we live. My office is in Rimouski, Quebec, a beautiful city located in the Bas-Saint-Laurent region, just on the border of the Gaspé Peninsula. These regions lie on the unceded traditional lands of the Wolastoqiyik, Waspikok, and Mi'kmaq First Nations. Today's session will be recorded, and the recording will be made available on Orchestras Canada's website on the resources section in the upcoming days. We're using the chat box to capture questions and comments during the presentation today, and Brad will address them after the presentation. But enough from me. I'd like now to introduce Brad Carlin, Senior Consultant at TRG Arts. Today, Brad will be sharing the latest insights from TRG Arts and Culture Benchmark, an ongoing international dataset that reveals the current state of arts and culture organizations in Canada, the US, and around the world. A growing number of Canadian orchestras are now taking part, but there's room for more. I will now pass the mic to Brad.
Thank you, Boran. Bonjour, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for making some time in your very busy weeks to dive into some data and to dig into some charts and graphs, which I promise there will be plenty. But I also hope that there are opportunities for us to have at least some Q&A, some conversation and back and forth, depending on what you see and what is occurring to you, what is standing out to you in the data that we're going to look at today, and especially if there's anything that's unclear, or if there's jargon that I'm using. I want to make sure that this information is as easy to absorb as possible. I'm going to try to, we're filling it to the brim with all kinds of really interesting stuff, but I also want to make sure that it's absorbable, that it's applicable to your work. And so I do want you to encourage you to be thinking about what might help you at the end of this presentation absorb it, put some of it into action, or help contextualize it in your particular orchestra. All right, let's dive in, and let me start with letting you know what is in the benchmark, what is in the data. So in the data that we are looking at today, we are looking at data from about 41 North American orchestras. That includes orchestras in Canada, a few of them, as well as those in the United States. When we are looking at a season point of view, a season perspective, we are looking at the 24-25 season, and we have normalized this through the months of July to June. We know that may not be everybody's season, but that is a common 12-month period with which season activity would take place. So that's what we've kind of organized around. We will be making comparisons to the most recently completed season that we have data for, so 24-25, and comparing that to two prior seasons in 22-23, 23-24 as well. We will use that 12-month period to review single ticket data, donation data, and some broader audience behavior trends. Now, when we're looking at subscription data, we are going to use a slightly different calendar, and this is because we wanted to align the calendar to when subscription transactions take place. And the way we receive the data is more about the timing of the transaction. And so when we're looking at subscription data, we are looking at a 12-month period of February, which is when the vast majority of subscription activity takes place for a season that normally begins in that July to June timeframe. So when we're looking at subscription data, we're going to look at two different perspectives. The first, very similar timeframe, the 22-23 to 24-25 seasons. We are also going to take a peek at our year-to-date data in the 25-26 and looking at to compare that to 22-23, 23-24 in the same roughly 6-month period of time. that we are going to be looking at in that February through July. So that data will go through July in the year to date, so we can get a feel for where the most current season is trending. Lastly, we're going to make some comparisons here to a wider performing arts benchmark, and this includes 142 North American organizations in theater, performing arts centers, dance, opera, ballet, and music that are non-symphony orchestras. So know that when we're making comparisons to other performing arts organizations, we're looking at all of these organizations, but it is exclusive of other symphony orchestra data.
Brad, before you continue, this is Boran.
Yes.
We have a question in the chat that is pertinent
Great.
for this slide. Of the 41 orchestras, how many are Canadian?
I believe there are 3 or 4 Canadian orchestras. So about 10%.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Good question. We would love to have more, Boran, as you said at the beginning, and we can talk about how we can set up more of those feeds at the end of the presentation. Okay. We're going to start big picture. So we're going to start way at the top, and we're going to look at some overall trends, both in ticketing and audience behavior. First, we'll look at a big picture of ticket revenues and ticket volumes. And let me orient you to the chart that you're looking at. In the bars, we have some teal bars there, and that refers to single ticket volume, total single ticket volume. In the blue bars, stacked on top of the teal, we have subscriber or membership tickets. So I'm using subscription and membership interchangeably. Some orchestras use a membership model. Some orchestras have a subscription model. For the purposes of this analysis, we have combined those and using those terms interchangeably. So that's where you'll see subscriber and member tickets, not pack tickets, generated by Then on the lines, we have 3 revenue lines. At the bottom, we have a darker green line, which is the subscription revenue. We have a lighter green line in the middle, which is our single ticket revenue. And we have a purplish, blackish line there at the top, which is the total ticketing revenue line across the benchmark that we're looking at here. Underneath 2 of those lines, you'll see some dots. And those dots are the pre-inflation adjusted levels. So what you're seeing in the solid lines, we have tried to adjust for inflation based on 2025. American inflation rates in the US has been adjusted to American dollars. And so what we're trying to just demonstrate there a little bit is a sense of the impact of inflation in both in the real terms and then inflation adjusted. So the solid lines, and a lot of when we're talking about revenue, we will be looking at inflation adjusted figures. So takeaways from this particular chart. What we're seeing between 22, 23, and 24, 25 is a 6% growth in the total number in this period in time, but a 16% growth in the amount of revenue being generated from these tickets. More of that growth you can see is coming from single tickets than from subscriptions. And the way you can see that is by how much the kind of teal bar has grown compared to how much the blue bar has grown. So, but in aggregate, it's a 6% growth in orchestras within this period of time. When we compare that to other performing arts sectors, it's pretty similar. So our peers in the other performing arts sectors have seen a similar 5% growth in total ticket volume during this time period, and a similar 15% growth in kind of all-in ticket revenue when adjusted for inflation for this time. The next thing we're looking at is overall total frequency. And so here we're looking at households, and we're counting households by the number of tickets that they have purchased within a particular season. So how many events have they purchased within a particular season? So sorry, not counting the tickets, we're counting the number of events that they have purchased within a season. This would include subscribers and members. So this is all households, but instead of getting wrapped up in whether that was a subscriber with high frequency or a single ticket buyer with high frequency. We're just looking at households and how many people are coming to one event there in purple, how many people within a year are attending 2 to 3 events in the teal, how many people are coming 4 or 5, and how many people are coming to 6. And we who are buying tickets to orchestras within a given year, and that's what is driving a lot of the growth. We're seeing a little bit more growth. It's a smaller box, but a little bit more growth in those folks attending 2 to 3 events within a season. And then when we combine the blue and the green there, the basically four plus events, we're seeing about 12% growth. So the good news here is we're seeing growth overall. We're seeing growth in frequency at all levels. We're seeing a little bit more growth in the kind of mid-range of frequency, 2 to 3 events. But still, overall, more people buying tickets to attend orchestral performances in 24-25 than they had the 2 previous years. This next view is what we call audience typology, and it is a way to segment audiences based on the recency of their transactions. There's 3 categories here. We have new customers, right? So that's pretty self-explanatory. These were customers which, when we study the data, as best we can tell, they appear to us to be engaging with that orchestra for the very first time. We have current customers who, again, as best we can tell, prior to their most recent ticket purchase, they had had another ticket purchase within the past 18 months, versus those who we consider to be re-engaged, which is prior to their most recent ticket purchase, their previous ticket purchase was more than 18 months ago. So you can see those definitions there at the bottom of the slide. What we're looking at here is the proportion of, again, all ticket buyers. So this is subscriber members and single ticket buyers all packaged into one. And we're looking at the proportion of ticket buyers based on this recency distribution. And not a whole lot of change. So we've got the 3 seasons here, 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25. And basically the story here is not a significant change in the proportionality in terms of the relationships that orchestras have with their ticket buyers. So the volume has come up, but proportionally, it basically means it hasn't changed very much at all. Maybe a slight decline in the proportion of new customers between 22, 23, and 24, 25. You can see that coming down 40% to 38%, slight increase from 49% to 51% in terms of current customers, and the re-engaged customers especially flat. But in aggregate, you're looking at these numbers and you're telling me, come on, Brad, those are flat, right? It's pretty flat. The next piece of behavior that we study is when audience members are purchasing their tickets. And in particular, we've been really interested in studying this trend of buying habits within 12 weeks of a performance. So this first chart here, you're looking at 0 on the far right-hand side, and we're looking at the proportion of tickets, the percentage of tickets that were sold in the last 12 weeks. And so we can see how obviously within the last 2 weeks is when we're selling, somewhere between, it's about 30-40% of our tickets are being sold within the last 2 weeks. And then there's that long tail of when folks are buying far in advance. And again, this includes subscribers and members who we know purchase much earlier on in advance of concerts, but our single ticket buyers are the ones who are dominating our ticket purchases from about 4 weeks out. And in particular, the largest proportion of those being sold within the past couple of weeks. And we only have 1 year worth of data on here because this trend has not changed within the study period that we've looked at. It has not changed at all. It would be the 3 years stacked on top of each other. And even more interestingly, I think when we go back and we look at 1819 from pre-pandemic data, these lines haven't moved very much at all from pre-pandemic times. Um, there is a feeling within the sector that people are buying later. And maybe that's true within individual organizations. Again, we're looking at big aggregated data sets, and maybe behavior in your market and with your orchestra is fundamentally different than what it was pre-COVID in terms of when people are buying their tickets. But I think what we're seeing in aggregate is ultimately not that much of a change. I think it feels more acute to orchestras because of the relative decline. We're still crawling and climbing our way out of declines in subscription and membership. We are a little more reliant on our single ticket sales now post-pandemic than we were pre-pandemic. And because single ticket buyers are predominantly buying in this, 2-week window, we are feeling that more, even though they are buying at the same time as they had before. We just notice it more because we are now more reliant upon those ticket sales than we were pre-COVID. So that's a hypothesis that we have around trying to align what we hear from organizations, which is this impression that people are buying later and people are buying later, that doesn't always seem to align with the aggregated data. Underneath this, we're comparing these timescales over time in a simple way, which is just greater than 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks. So on the left-hand side, we're looking at what proportion of tickets were sold greater than 2 weeks and what proportion of tickets were sold less than 2 weeks, and that breaking that out between orchestras and other performing arts. And so as you can see here, very, very, very subtle trends. If anything, in the past few years, the proportion of folks buying greater than 2 weeks, buying even earlier, has increased a little bit, and really not fundamentally that different from our peers in the performing arts, the wider performing arts sector. Next, I want to share some household data, some demographic data with you all. This is, I will admit, this is United States data only. So we are curious about these broader trends in audience diversity, both between age and race. So we're looking at some demographics around race between single ticket buyers and subscribers. We have 22, 23 to 24, 25, and we can see kind of racial demographics and profiles described there. This comes from aggregated market data that is paired and matched against the data sets that we have from a third-party market research organization. And as we can see here, basically the takeaway is very, very subtle shifts, but fundamentally no significant changes in terms of single ticket buyers becoming more diverse. Perhaps modest increases in the proportion of Asian and Hispanic audiences in American orchestras. Comparing that to subscription and membership, the trends over time more static here. We're seeing less change and higher, maybe less diversity on the subscriber and membership breakdown. This is super interesting, and I have been really excited to be talking about this. This has got internally, this has got us talking and curious and wanting to dig in here more, because this is kind of fresh out of the oven data around generational cohort. So on the left-hand side, we're looking at single ticket buyers by generational cohort, and what we have there at the bottom, we have our silent generation, so those born between 1928 to 1945. Above them, we've got our Gen Z friends born after 1997. At the top, the 3 generational cohorts who are making up the vast majority of our single ticket buyers are still our baby boomers, our Gen Xers, and our millennials. But what has really jumped out to us has been the rate of growth of millennials, particularly in the past year. We continue to see a pretty steady decline in the presence of baby boomers, and in our single ticket buying population, we've reached this really interesting intersection where baby boomers and millennials are making up the same proportion of our single ticket buyers. Gen X in blue here has come down just a little bit. It's been relatively flat. And the really interesting kind of provocation on this is, have we reached peak Gen X in terms of single ticket buying? When we look back to pre-pandemic times, the baby boomers were at 38% of our single ticket buying population. So you can really see the decline from 38 to 31, kind of pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. Gen X was at 30% pre-pandemic. So did they peak at 32%? It's been relatively flat and it is starting to come down, whereas we've seen a really strong increase from millennials. So some really interesting potential implications here in terms of the rapid change, getting younger, how our single ticket buying audiences are getting younger faster. When we look at this data in subscription, not a whole lot of change here. Our baby boomers are still the largest generational cohort represented, and their levels have been flat at a little less than half of all subscribers are baby boomers. Gen X has been flat. There in blue, we've seen significant declines in silent generation. But again, look at those millennials. Look at them coming up fast. The only growing cohort there from 10% in 22, 23 to 24, 25. So really interesting how we are seeing meaningful growth generationally within millennials for both single ticket buying and subscribing. It's cool, right? Can nerd out on this all day. Okay, let's talk about single tickets now. We've done a kind of big picture overview of broad trends in ticket buying and demographics, and now let's dig into individual behaviors and relationships. First, we'll start with our single ticket buyers. So a very similar chart to what we looked at the beginning. We're looking at total tickets, so we're looking at total ticket volume there in the teal, and inflation-adjusted revenue for single tickets across 23, 24, and 25 in the light green. And so what we've seen from single ticket revenue and volume is a 7% increase in single tickets and a 27% increase in inflation-adjusted revenues from single tickets. So we are selling more single tickets over the past couple of years, but we are generating a lot more revenue. And we'll get into what that means in terms of the disparity between those two numbers and how it relates to the average ticket prices being paid. Spoiler alert, that's the reason why those two numbers are so different. When we compare that to our peers elsewhere, really interesting to see similar amounts of growth in volume of single tickets, but not quite so much on the revenue side. And so this is a first really distinct difference between what's been going on in the data set we've been studying with orchestras versus what we see in some other performing arts, which really has to do around average prices that are being paid by orchestra customers increasing much faster and much more significantly than the average prices being paid by ticket buyers to other performing arts. So let's dig into that a little bit here. Per capita revenue. So the average ticket price paid, we take the number of tickets sold, we take the total revenue, we're dividing total revenue by the number of tickets and arriving at this per capita revenue figure. In the bars there in the darker green, we've got the orchestra per capita average in that number, and then comparing that to the other performing arts average in the teal line just above it. So you can see the average ticket price is lower amongst North American orchestras compared to other performing arts organizations, but the growth is more significant. 19% growth in the per cap, and this is against 6% growth in the US in terms of inflation between 22, 23, and 24, 25. So this is more than just organizations keeping pace with inflation. It is real average ticket price growth beyond just the rate of inflation. Whereas in the other performing arts, we're only seeing a 3% increase in their per cap from roughly $55 to $56.50. So this is really interesting, and I want to make an important distinction here between the average price paid going up and ticket prices going up. This data does not suggest that ticket prices have been going up. They probably have. And in many places, we know they have, but this does not mean ticket prices have gone up 19%. This means the average price paid by customers has gone up 19%. This could be the cause of any number of changes in behavior. What price points people are buying, what price points are they not buying, in addition to how organizations have been managing their price increases. I think the only hypothesis we have as to why so much more growth in orchestras than other performing arts has been perhaps more assertive increases in prices, perhaps more assertive growth in how orchestras have responded to inflationary pressures and cost of living crises in various parts of the world. But it also could just be a behavior change in terms of the people coming back, of the people buying tickets, just buying more expensive tickets. So there could be still some underlying issues going on there around price accessibility and the impact that prices have in terms of driving volume. But at least for now, the story is orchestras are selling more tickets than they did in the past couple of years, and doing so at noticeably higher prices over a relatively short amount of time, and at a greater rate of average price paid growth than our peers in other sectors. The next thing I want to look at is households. I want to look at the people. That is ultimately the people who are buying the tickets that is generating the revenue. And so we care a great deal about the behavior of single ticket buying households. So we will see the number of households there in purple, and then the number of tickets on average that they buy in each order. So each time a household is transacting with an orchestra, on average, how many tickets are they buying within that particular order for that particular visit? So you can think of order and visit as being synonymous there. And you'll recall from a previous slide when we looked at household frequency overall, you'll remember overall across all ticket buyers, we saw a 14% increase in households overall. Well, within the single ticket buyers, we're seeing a 15% increase. So it would make sense, given the proportionality of our single ticket buyers to the total tickets overall, that we would see similar rates of growth among our single ticket buyers at 15%. Now, the number of tickets that they are buying on average for each visit has declined by 8%. And this is interesting. This has implications in terms of more people, but buying fewer tickets. Now, they're buying fewer tickets with each visit, but we've got more people and they're paying more for these tickets. So it is taking more people to fill similar numbers of seats as it did pre-COVID. Fortunately, we're generating more revenue from these individuals, but one can't help but wonder if there is a correlation between the increases in the average ticket price paid and the declines in order size. Because the only other way for us to really grow volume for our halls to fill really full is either we got to get more people buying tickets, which we know is difficult and expensive to go find customers and build relationships. So the more efficient way is to try to get those people to come back, or to try to get existing customers to buy more. And so what we're seeing is, at the moment, we're undermining the impact. We're undermining our impact a little bit in being able to attract more people to buy tickets, but if they're buying fewer tickets when they do. It isn't quite balancing out. We're still seeing net growth in tickets overall, but the growth is being curtailed overall by, even though more people buying tickets, they're buying fewer tickets for each visit. Talk about frequency next. How does this metric compare across other sectors? Pretty similar. Now, the decline in order size here, both in other performing arts and in orchestras, could be driven by changes in the groups market. This would include group ticket buyers. And as we've seen changes in the groups market, which were in place prior to the pandemic, if we have fewer group bookers, if group bookings are generally getting smaller, these are trends that we are also seeing, that they could disproportionately be pulling down the order size. But when we filter for that, when we account for group bookings and we only look at non-group bookings, basically looking at households who are booking fewer than 10 tickets, we're still seeing declines in the size of the number of tickets that they're buying per visit. So it's both, but certainly declines in the group market are contributing to the declines in order size overall. Let's talk frequency. So the other important kind of dial that we can turn to fill our halls to drive single ticket volume and revenue is to get those single ticket buyers to attend more frequently. So orchestra data in the pink bars with the numbers above, it's letting us know they're on average, the average number of concerts that our single ticket buyers attend within a year. And so you can see that that number has been relatively flat. Our peers in other performing arts ranging from 1.2 went up to maybe 1.26 and then back down to 1.2. So not massively different there, maybe a slight decline, but basically frequency is flat, households are up, number of tickets per household is down. The net of all of that is some modest single ticket volume growth. So while that's good, we're having to work a lot harder to get that growth because it was requiring more relationships for us to manage. And the other good news there is we are generating more revenue per ticket, significantly more than we were a few years ago. But real questions about what is driving that, how sustainable it is, and what impacts it may be playing on our ability to continue to drive more households and higher frequency. All right, some takeaways on the single ticket side of things. As I mentioned, good news. More people are buying single tickets to orchestras than in recent years. So just flat out, more people buying tickets, which is great. Now, there's some things underneath that, as we've mentioned, in terms of their frequency and in terms of the number of tickets that they're buying. More good news, the average price paid for single tickets has grown faster than the rate of inflation and has been faster than other North American performing arts organizations. Which is a good news, at least for our organization's financial bottom line and being able to generate more revenue than perhaps we were a couple of years ago on the tickets that we are selling. And yet, as I mentioned, it is taking more households to fill the same number of seats as in previous years. So our marketing team's having to work harder. We're having to generate more customer relationships because folks are not necessarily increasing their frequency and they're buying fewer tickets with each visit. Let's talk subscription and membership, shall we? Okay, a couple of things going on here in this slide. Let me orient you to the top. So the first part of this, we are looking at that 12-month window I was talking about at the top of the presentation. We're thinking about this February to January timeframe for when subscription sales mostly take place, 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25. We have subscriber member tickets in blue here at the top, and we've got the subscription revenue in those years adjusted for inflation in the green. So for orchestras in this time period across these 12-month windows, we've seen 5% growth in tickets, 5% growth in revenue. Right? This is a slightly different trend than what we're seeing in single tickets. We're seeing kind of inline commensurate growth in terms of the number of tickets and the revenue being generated by those tickets, which is really different than what we were seeing from the single tickets, isn't it? Now down below, we're just looking at the first 6 months of each of these campaigns. So from February through July, which we're calling 22-23 year to date, 23-24 year to date, all the way to 25-26 year to date. Look at this. Look at this. Here's some more good news. So far, 25-26 year to date has been an exceptionally strong year. We may finally be seeing some positive impact of a few years of steady growth in single tickets, right? It takes time to turn single ticket buyers into subscribers. Subscribers, unfortunately, don't just walk in off the street. I wish they did. Most of them have to be single ticket buyers with us for years before. And so we've been coming out of this pandemic. We've been rebuilding our single ticket pipeline, as we've seen in the data before. But we haven't seen a lot of growth on the subscription side until the first 6 months of this 25-26 season for the 25-26 season, but within the first 6 months of this look back year. So between 25-26 and 22-23, the same 6-month window, 26% more tickets so far and 24% more revenue. So finally seeing some meaningful growth, perhaps for subscription on this side of the pandemic. Now you can pick up, I'm sure, on some per capita trends there, especially when comparing to what we saw with what was going on in single ticket buying. So top chart here, we're looking at that 12-month period, a full season. of subscription sales there from 23 to 25. We have the number of households in purple, the number of subscribers or members, and then the average that they are paying on a per ticket for their subscriber or member tickets. And really, the takeaway up there is flat, 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 right? We've got 2% growth only in that time period in terms of the number of people who are committing to be subscribers and members for our orchestras. And we're only seeing 1% revenue growth when adjusted for inflation. We are one half step ahead of inflation in this time period. So not really significant revenue growth at all, really, really flat. Now, it's a similar trend. It's more subtle, but encouraging in the chart below where we're looking at that 6-month year to date kind of window. And there is you can start to see how flat, flat, flat. And then finally, in 25, 26, we're starting to see some real growth where we actually have 7% more member subscribers than we did at the same point in previous points of the campaign. But look at that per capita revenue has come down just a little bit compared to the first 6 months. So some interesting behavior here to think about when you think about this in your own orchestra about what strategies you may have employed in order to try to preserve your relationships with subscribers. Were you more resistant to employ price increases? Were you more assertive about your discounts or offers in order to acquire and attract new subscribers that may be, not necessarily driving more per capita revenue into subscription, rather focusing on growing the volume of subscription, but really different trends from the relationship between revenue and volume of households and tickets than what we were seeing in single tickets. When we're looking at the number of tickets that our members or subscribers are buying in their packages, we can see the 12-month view up here on top. Again, we've got the number of households in the purple and then the number of tickets on average per household. So think about this as, let's say there's an average of 2 packages per household. You can take that 9.4 and divide it by 2, and you can kind of think about how many tickets per household you're seeing there per person within a household. But really modest growth. Again, they've got that 2% increase in the number of households, just a slight 3% increase. So package size is not really changing that much at all until there it is again, another really interesting increase in the data behind the 25-26 aggregate subscription season data, where we've gone up to 12.2. That's an 18% increase in the number of tickets per patron, where we've got more subscribers and members who are buying more tickets than they did at this point in the first 6 months on average versus previous years. Now, my math nerds in the Zoom room are already noticing, wait a minute, Brad, there's a difference here between where the seasons are ending in terms of that average number of tickets. So look at the 24-25. This is the 12 months worth of data, and where we finish a 12-month campaign at 9.4 tickets per household versus where we are in the first 6 months of a campaign, which is what we're looking at here at the bottom. And we can see that there is a decline, and this is normal. This is to be expected. Early in the first parts of your subscription campaign, overwhelmingly dominated by a volume of renewals and your most loyal folks and the people who are buying your biggest and best and most valuable packages. And as the subscription campaign moves on, and as we move our way through the season, we start moving into more acquisition and smaller package types. That average number of tickets per subscriber is naturally going to decrease. But this gives you a sense of how much kind of settling you can see in these tickets per household taking place in 24-25, going from 10.6 to 9.4. So noting that we're at 12.2 for 25-26 year to date, there's still a really strong case that once we look at all of the data for 25-26, we're still going to finish this metric at a clip that is significantly higher than the 10.6 where we finished in 24-25. So some encouraging stuff coming out of subscription and membership. So it's been pretty stable and flat as a table for the past few years, but maybe, just maybe, finally, in 25-26, we're starting to see some uplift. So we've had some really modest growth in households and ticket per caps, and these especially on the ticket per caps, have been lagging behind the growth of what we're seeing in single tickets. The households have been pretty steady. And the 25-26 campaign's got some green shoots. Our last insight here is into individual giving. And I want to say this is where the data is murkier because organizations have lots of different ways within their CRMs to organize and categorize the data that they collect around individual giving, around annual fund, which is really what we're looking to try to measure here. There's not an ability for us to get into a lot of granularity in terms of gift types. It depends on how funds are set up within CRMs and organizations and stuff. So take this with a grain of salt that the intent is we're fairly confident what we're looking at here is gifts from individuals. It is intended to be gifts that we're measuring in the annual fund. Is it possible that some of this data includes one-off bequests or perhaps an endowment gift here or there? Sure, it may, but so there may be some nuance in there, but what we're trying to understand are giving trends generally. Okay, caveats aside, let's take a look at donations and revenue. So we're looking at gifts in the purple bars and revenue from those gifts in green. So between 24-25 and 22-23, you can see 11% increase in gifts and 6% increase in inflation-adjusted revenue. What we should pick up on from our previous conversations in the other buyer types is that this is signaling perhaps some changes in behavior in the average gift size, right? Because when we're seeing a certain level of growth in gifts and we're not matching that level of growth in revenue, something's going on there in terms of the average gift size. So we will definitely unpack that. But here is an interesting comparison with the other performing arts sectors. We are seeing a similar increase in the volume of gifts, but declines in the total revenue when adjusted for inflation coming through to other performing arts organizations. So again, the underlying drivers there in terms of the average gift size, and already noticing some differences there in the orchestra data. They're even more pronounced and extreme in what we're seeing from other performing arts sectors. So as hard as it may feel to some of my development friends in the room, it is a significant challenge, a more significant challenge perhaps in some other sectors, at least in aggregate. So let's talk about average gift size. As I was alluding to, that's kind of the real driver here in some of the trends that we have been seeing. So the purple bars here, we're looking at donors, we're looking at households here in the green. We're looking at the average gift size, again, adjusted for inflation. And we can see, yes, there's that 11% growth in donors, just as we saw a similar amount in the number of gifts. Most donors only give once a year. And so that's why those numbers tend to correlate pretty closely. But the average gift size has come down 5%. Compared to our friends in other performing arts sectors, that average gift size has declined 17%. Now, there's some interesting we have some hypotheses. We can't kind of prove or know for sure what is happening here in terms of average gift size. There's wider macro impacts in terms of giving and pressures on household income and pressures on needs for philanthropy, perhaps in other parts of our communities. All of that could be true and could be having some impact, big kind of macro level stuff. But when we really think back to the other buyer types that we have been studying in this data set so far, and you reflect on what are the big picture trends we saw. We've been seeing consistent growth over the past few years in single ticket buying households. We're seeing growth in their households that has grown faster than the households and subscribers. We're seeing growth in the number of tickets that they're buying. We're seeing growth, yes, in the average ticket price that they're paying. The other thing we know historically is that single ticket buyers, when they donate at smaller average gift sizes. They donate less frequently, but they also donate at smaller average gift sizes. Subscribers, much higher proportion of subscribers donate. They tend to donate at higher average gift sizes. But over time, as we have become and needed to, in the recovery, become more reliant upon single ticket buyers to drive our ticket revenue, and our number of subscribers has been relatively flat and stagnant. We haven't been adding to that pool. We are also impacting the pool of potential donors and the potential behavior that they are bringing into a philanthropic relationship with our organizations. And so as we rely more on folks who may only have subscribers, may only have single ticket buying behavior or infrequent subscriber behavior, we are probably able to get more donors, but those donors are going to be giving us smaller gifts, right? This is our kind of hypothesis on how all of these previous data points we've been looking at could be tying together to help kind of tell the story of what we're seeing here on the donation side of things. So it's relatively brief section. There's not quite as much detail that we can get into on individual giving because of the limitations of the data. But as we were mentioning, similar increases in the number of donors between the North American orchestras and the performing arts and their giving. But it has been the growth of donors has been closer to the growth in single ticket buyers. This could be that correlation causation effect. Again, can't prove it, but there is a correlation there that is worth thinking about, and how the behavior or the reliance upon donors who may only have single ticket buying behavior might be doing to the average gift sizes that we can generate. Okay, I am going to stop talking now for a moment, and we will dig into questions that you may have.
Oh, what a fantastic presentation, Brad. Your deep knowledge of this data and the conclusions that you are making around them is just quite impressive for me to observe. So thank you so much for that. I don't see any questions in the chat for now, so I would like to encourage everyone that if you have any questions, anything that needs clarifying, that you'd like more information about, please feel free to type it in the chat and we will address it. And I do actually have a question, because a lot of what you are saying that showed up in the data actually came up anecdotally in some of our marketing peer groups that we're discussing, especially in terms of the trends of last minute sales. And I would even go to say that some of the discussions we had were not even about most of tickets being sold in the last 2 weeks, but even like in the last 2 days before a performance. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering how all of this and the trends of, having more people buying tickets for the same number of tickets, how does that affect, in your opinion, the staff allocations? For example, maybe there needs to be a shift on how the organization is structured to better respond to those shifting behaviors of our audiences.
That's really, really interesting question. The way I think it plays out, so there's a couple questions there I think about staffing. One is maybe how our marketing teams are working and responding to sales. How do we build the ability, the kind of the endurance or the confidence to not panic 3-4 weeks out, to kind of say, how do we avoid panic sales? How do we avoid papering the houses and giving away a bunch of comps because we're
Yes.
starting to get really worried? How do we, as uncomfortable as it is, as I wish it were not this way, but how can we have strength and confidence in the last few weeks of our campaign to kind of hold our nerve, to not undermine our product, to not undermine our price points? And how do we lean into these later sales, perhaps in a way? How do we steer marketing resources to ensure that we can be amplifying messages and really building up to these moments, until and when we can start to encourage and invite patrons to perhaps buy earlier? And how much energy and effort are we using to incentivize and to encourage and drive some more of those earlier sales, so we are less reliant upon those last minute sales? The staffing part is really interesting because it makes me think about how are we making decisions about staffing our venues, right? I mean, I
Right.
imagine we're trying to make a tough call on how many ushers we might need, how many people at the bar are we going to need on a particular night. And we're trying to make those decisions well in advance. And data plays an important part here. I think really, wishing the trends were different is not going to make it so,
Right.
but planning with the trends that we have in mind and understanding, okay, if we've got a target for a show and these are points at which we can make decisions and we'll follow the pacing curves as best we can. The thing that I would caution against is deciding too early to pull back on staffing in a venue where we can that might undermine or impact customer experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because think back to some of this data, we're still in rebuilding mode. We are still relying upon single ticket buyers to hopefully build up enough frequency to become subscribers again and get into that subscription behavior. And if we're showing them an experience which feels under-resourced because we were anxious or worried about how, paying too much to have too many ushers or having too many bar spots open, that we may be diminishing their experience because of last minute sales and putting some barriers in front of us in the long term that may have been more short term oriented around just trying to save some money in the near term. So these are really difficult decisions and ones that I hope folks will think really carefully on about staffing to try to think a little long term about what is the relationship we're trying to build. And if we are more reliant on single ticket buyers, if they have a great time, is that helping us in the long run? And can we absorb what might feel like unneeded cost in terms of ushers and folks at the bars?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is really the core value of this type of webinar, this fabulous webinar that you just presented is that folks don't feel like they're alone. They have something that they've experienced. It's anecdotal. They compare it to past years' data. It doesn't make any sense. But knowing that others are going through the same thing, I think makes them take those decisions with more confidence. So I
For
think
sure.
that's fantastic. Well, I see no more questions. There are no questions in the chat. Do you have any parting words for us?
I'm sorry I put everyone to sleep. This is all I've bored you all to sleep
Or you explained it all
with the
too
chart.
well.
Agreed. Thank you. Um, yeah, so I mean, let me say we would love to have more Canadian orchestras in the benchmark. And so there is a page on our website at trgarts.com. There's a page for the arts and culture benchmark. There's a sign up form there that you can look at and see. Thank you for dropping it in the chat there, Lauren. There's a form there that you can submit to, and it helps us. We ask a couple of questions about what ticketing system you're using in your CRM, and it's easier for some than others, but it at least lets us know what you're working with, and our team will follow up, and if we can make a match, we will work on getting your data included. It's free to be part of the benchmark. It requires no cost to you. As a member of the benchmark, you will get access to dashboards which will show the benchmark data being updated each day. It's updated each day, and so that you can be tracking yourself against the sector throughout. So I encourage you, will help us strengthen webinars like this in the future to have a much stronger representation of Canadian data in there. And so, yeah, please take a look, and hope you'll find it useful to you.
Absolutely. Well, with this, I want to thank you so much, Brad, for so generously sharing those insights. And I also want to say another word of thanks to our fantastic simultaneous interpreter, Danielle Allard. We will be posting additional updates about the research from TRG. We will be hosting more webinars in the future. So stay tuned. The best way to stay tuned with all of this is our newsletter that we send out monthly. Lauren has posted links in the chat on how to sign up for that. We do have some other webinars coming up. There is one in specific, actually, that I want to tell you about, which is the launch of the Green Orchestra's project. So we will be launching environmental sustainability resources for Canadian orchestras. This is coming up on October 14th at noon, so right after Thanksgiving. And those are new resources, an environmental sustainability guide and an environmental sustainability charter that was designed to help Canadian orchestras of all sizes to take meaningful action to reducing environmental impact while fostering innovation, community engagement, and artistic vitality. So we do hope to see you there next week. Until then, I wish you all a fantastic rest of your day and a great long weekend. Thank you so much again, Brad. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you.